Shadow Garden to Sid is nothing more than a fantasy. A clever fabrication from back in his youth that up until now he still believes to be just roleplay. Of course, we know everything to be very much real, but as one of the core gags that makes Eminence and Shadow what it is, Sid may never actually realize that. No, seriously. As one of the most dense protagonists to have ever been isekai'd, it's very possible Sid may continue his delusion forever. So, with that being a focal point of the anime, it's not often we get to see much about Shadow Garden. Sure, we get the occasional meeting and casual operation, but things like hierarchy, the 7 shadows, and exactly how powerful they are more so mysteries left to the novels and mobile game. That being the case, let's take a look at what Shadow Garden really is and see how strong the organization and its core members are. But first, this video is sponsored by the free-to-play ARPG Dungeon Hunter 6, the highly anticipated addition to the previous Dungeon Hunters from 2009 all the way to 2015. That's right, after 8 long years and 5 amazing installments, you can download the newest Dungeon Hunter right now using the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen if you're on PC. In this fantasy-styled game unique to mobile, not only will you collect numerous heroes to utilize in fast-paced hack-and-slash combat, but the bosses themselves become playable too. Killing a boss isn't all there is to them anymore. You can loot, ride, or fly them, summon up to 3 to become members of your squad, then have them follow you and perform powerful combo skills. You can even shapeshift into them and take their ultimate powers for yourself. Combine this with optimized 3D graphics and stunning scale animations, and what you get is the best visual experience and smoothest combat on mobile devices. Then, as if that wasn't already enough, you can play with guildmates and battle in real-time guild wars, test all sorts of builds with different skill trees, then even trade items via the in-game auction system. So, if you want to jump in and check out Dungeon Hunter 6, then be sure to use my link below to download today, or scan the QR code if you're viewing on PC. Anyone who does will get a special starter pack worth over $50. That's 10 summoning scrolls, 1 SSR, and an accessory pack. You can also use your game account to enter the Lucky Spin event and win awesome prizes like an iPhone 15 or Apple Watch for free. But now, let's get back to the video. Shadow Garden's core purpose is to fight against the cult of Diablos. They build influence and gather resources, bolster their ranks with girls afflicted by demonic possession, then train them to become powerful warriors capable of fighting against the cult. It's a massive organization built upon a simple story shared between Shadow and Alpha. Alpha would then go on to recruit 6 more, and their investigation into the cult and the curse that had once plagued them would lead the 7 Shadows on a mission far away from Sid. You see, in addition to finding out the cult was operating across the globe, there were several key findings that they'd made on demonic possession. They found that since the heroes who slayed Diablos were all women, it was exclusively women who would be the ones to suffer from possession. Then, because the curse was most common with elves and beastkin, it was evident that those with longer lifespans were the most prone to possession, especially the ones whose bloodlines were closest to the heroes. So, while humans could still become possessed, since their lives were short and connection to the heroic bloodline weak, they of all species were the least susceptible to the curse. It's the reason why very few humans can be found within Shadow Garden at all. As for why Shadow Garden is only women, well, with female elves and therianthropes being the most compatible subjects to possession, they were the only types of people saved by the 7 Shadows. You wouldn't find the cult going out of their way to locate others, since only those closest to possession were the ones worth doing experiments on. So, as the 7 Shadows scoured the globe wiping out all of the cult's operations, numerous possessed would be saved and added into the ranks of Shadow Garden. They would be taught to fight the same way that Shadow had taught the original Shades, then bestowed with the great Shadow wisdom that Sid had left with them. This being anything and everything from how to use magic-infused slime, all the way to the stories and knowledge from his past life in Japan. By integrating this Shadow wisdom into the very foundations of Shadow Garden, the organization as a whole was able to expand its influence and become what it is today. In fact, if not for the times when Gamma and Beta would pick his brain, Beta wouldn't be the talented writer Natsume Kafka, Gamma wouldn't be the owner of the Mitsugoshi Company, and Epsilon wouldn't be the award-winning pianist Chiron. Each and every public persona the 7 Shadows used to influence the world have most in part been shaped by Sid's Shadow wisdom. Now, given the amount of wealth and influence gained by each of these public personas, there was no limit on the number of connections Shadow Garden now had in the world. Their network of information spread wide, and the amount of resources they had to maintain it were near limitless. Then, with their base of operations being in the old ancient city of Alexandria, what they'd managed to create was a secret global organization that not even the cult of Diablos could track. As for why this ancient city was so special, well, aside from Sid calling it the land of the shadows for them to rise up in, what it actually was a city of ruins home to the ancient Mist Dragon, a magical creature thought to be the strongest in existence. With a presence like that guarding the surrounding area, there was no way anyone would dare traverse a single foot towards it. The legend alone was enough to make any and all too afraid to, making this the perfect base for Shadow Garden to operate in. So, with a hidden base, global influence, and 666 members, the only thing left to make Shadow Garden the global superpower it is a military might comparable to any other nations. I mean, Sid alone is definitely more than enough, but what about when it comes to the other members? How strong is Shadow Garden without, well, Shadow? Technically, the organization is led by Shadow himself, but since his involvement is minimal to none, the true strength of Shadow Garden lies with Alpha. She's the second in command who oversees all operations and activities. Below her are the 7 shades that serve as Shadow's special bodyguards, then below them are their respective units of named numbers and regular numbers. That's the core format of Shadow Garden's membership. To specify more on each though, let's start with what's common between all 4 of these groups. From Alpha and the 7 to the named and regular numbers, each and every one of them were cured from demonic possession, a unique feat that grants them magical power beyond that which is considered normal. Since the possession is essentially just an overload of mana, it's the process of being cured that grants control over it. You see, what Sid and the others do when they cure these possessed is make the afflicted's body capable of handling such mana. Whereas the flow of mana would be blocked and accumulated, the result of being cured makes that mana flow freely, allowing for full control over what would otherwise be an unnatural amount of magic. Combine this with skills in combat taught by Sid himself, and what you get are an army of magically gifted soldiers all fighting with intelligence rather than just brute force. So not only is their training superior in every way, but as the once possessed, they're also innately more powerful too. Of course, the level of training depends on who it is that was giving it, so if you're a newer member being trained by Lambda, it's only natural your skills are going to be subpar compared to the 7 shadows trained by Sid. I mean, they did after all spend 3 years studying directly under him, learning everything they could about both magic and martial arts. So, as the first 7 original members, they alone stand at the peak in terms of both power and responsibility. They had taken the wisdom Shadow bestowed upon them and used it to master their respective fields of combat, science, espionage, and economics. Then, as the select few actually cured via Shadow's magic, it makes sense that their power far exceed every other member's. In fact, when Rose had seen just how powerful someone like Alpha was, she was certain no government would be capable of handling her right now. If any nation wanted to subdue just one of these 7 shadows, apparently an inordinate amount of military resources would be required to do so. So even if it was just the 7 shadows waging war on an entire country, the amount of damage they could do would be catastrophic. Like, individually they're stronger than the strongest knights in every country, so you can only imagine how much more powerful they'd be together. Now, as for how they rank individually, while all of them do have their own different strengths and skills, the order they're in is simply the order in which they joined Shadow Garden. If you're curious as to who the strongest to weakest is, the order of overall power is mostly speculation. Alpha's definitely the strongest and Gamma the weakest, but when you get to the middle ranks at 3, 4, and 5, it really is hard to say who might be stronger. Since we're gonna talk about each of them anyway though, here's the order that I think they're in. First is obviously Alpha, Shadow's second in command and overseer of all Shadow Garden operations. With an abundance of magic that surpasses even Sid's, Alpha's innate strength combined with high intelligence and immaculate technique places her at the top of Shadow Garden behind only Shadow. Not a single member compares when it comes to skills, strength, and swordsmanship, so much so that no one even dares to challenge her anymore. When it comes to raw destructive power and physical strength, there's no one that does it quite like how Delta does. She's the second strongest overall, but in terms of pure physicality, even Alpha doesn't compare. I mean, Sid himself has said that she's the physically strongest of the 7 shadows. So, with her beastkin traits providing superhuman strength, speed, and senses, it's that combined with the training she did with Shadow that makes her one of the most effective killing machines in all of Shadow Garden. Also the most brutal since she tends to lack the ability of self-control. Now, since there's not much else Delta provides other than strength, it's often she serves as Shadow Garden's go-to combatant, the number one pick when they need someone to, let's just say, send a message. Next, we have the 6th member Zeta, who, while not so much mentioned in the anime or the novels yet, is known to be one of the most talented members of Shadow Garden. It's too soon to say whether she's a fair rival to Delta or even Alpha, but apparently she's good at whatever she does and also one of the best at controlling her magic. Beta comes in after her, and while being proficient in mostly everything, it's her ability to gather information and analyze it that makes her so good at supporting. She doesn't quite specialize in anything the way that all the other members do, but when it comes to filling in like a League of Legends flex player, she's more than capable of fitting any role that's given to her. She can lead, just not as good as Alpha, fight though not as strong as Delta, strategize but not at the same level as Gamma, then infiltrate but just not as skillful as the way that Epsilon does. So, by becoming skilled at pretty much everything, Beta has a good sense on how to use those skills to support in the best way possible. She may never be the best at one specific thing, but rest assured her position is just as crucial as all the others, especially since her Natsume identity gets her into networks that no one else may be privy to. Next, we have Epsilon, and while she is at a close 5th with Beta, her single specialization in espionage makes her not quite as strong as Beta. She does control her magic the best out of anyone, but just because she can fake her body figure for years on end, doesn't mean she can cast nukes just like how Sid does. Instead, it just means she can do things like cure demonic possession, making her the only one alongside Alpha capable of doing so. So, despite mainly being used for infiltration missions now, back when Shadow Garden was just getting started, her role in building the organization definitely made her one of the more essential members. Ida's another Shadow that we don't see very often, but as the most intelligent out of all of them, she's the one spearheading the R&D department. By using the wisdom Shadow had given to her, Ida can reverse engineer pretty much anything. Like, we already know that she's working on the steam engine, but prior to that she reinvented the camera, constructed the very foundations the Mitsugoshi company is built off of, and even served as the architect for Shadow Garden's core bases of operation. The reason she ranks so low in terms of strength is because a sleep disorder often prevents her from performing well. It's not like she's not skilled or can't hold her own, it's just that this lack of sleep makes doing so difficult. She'll often doze off even when she's walking and act lethargic pretty much everywhere. If you're wondering how Gamma can possibly be weaker than someone who's never awake, well, that's because she has literally zero intuition. You see, much like how Delta's lack of intelligence makes her fighting style predictable, Gamma's lack of intuition makes hers inept. I mean, at least Delta has the instincts to back up her simple-minded strength, but when it comes to Gamma, no amount of strength will make her non-existent instincts useful on the battlefield. As Sid himself once put it, intuition is wasted on an idiot, and intelligence means nothing without intuition. So, while Delta and Gamma are rather similar, it's Gamma's lack of intuition that makes her so much weaker than everyone else. Where she makes up for it instead is with a strategical mindset unparalleled by any other. You see, as a person whose intellect rivals even Ida's, Gamma has often taken the role of strategist. She'll serve as Shadow Garden's rear commander and use her tactical insight to coordinate operations, a surprising skill considering she has no combat experience herself. But yeah, that's a brief overview of the 7 Shadows. Where that brings us to now is the numbers below them who have all joined after. So, while normally each number is simply the order in which that person had joined Shadow Garden, there's actually an elite group between 8 and 25 known as the named numbers, the strongest members that aren't already part of the 7 Shadows. As the finest non-OGs in all of Shadow Garden, these are the organization's upper echelon and often serve as immediate subordinates to the Shadows. So whether it be as an advisor, confidant, or interim commander, these specialized numbers are all given names to recognize their ranks, thus the reason they're known as the named numbers. We only know a few of them now, but of the ones that we do, there's Nu, Lambda, Chi, and Omega, all members who have shown exceptional skill as well as done much to contribute to Shadow Garden. As for the way this prestigious rank is gained, well, aside from being outright given for demonstrating incredible prowess, a number can earn one by challenging and defeating a named number. The exact process behind this isn't entirely known, but a lot of speculation suggests that there is at least one rule that needs to be followed. If a triple digit wants to challenge a named number, they must first earn the right by defeating a double digit. So, say someone like Rose wants to become a named number. In order to even have the ability to challenge one, she must first defeat a double digit to prove herself. Supposedly, that's the way that Kai and New had gained their ranks. Once again, this is just speculation, but the challenge system does in fact exist, and it's the only way to gain a name aside from being acknowledged by the 7. As for everyone else, there is no rank from 25 to 666, only the number representing the order in which you joined Shadow Garden. That's not to say there isn't some form of hierarchy, because when it comes to authority, a lower number can usually give orders to a higher number. There also tends to be a power disparity between every set of 100. So even though the numbers aren't meant to be an indicator of power, it is fair to make the assumption that those in the 100 to 200 range are relatively stronger than those in the 200 to 300 range. Now, though every number receives the same regiment of training now, the role they take up in Shadow Garden is likely dependent on what they specialize in. They would probably be grouped based on their strengths and formed into a unit under a named number that could use them. That named number would then take orders from a shade, and that shade would get their orders from Alpha. That's the general structure in which Shadow Garden operates by. Alpha's orders are typically the utmost authority, but if Shadow was to ever step in and contradict her, his word would always override hers. He's the absolute ruler whose command is everything. He may not know the true extent of his organization, but the missions he carries out are followed through with the utmost resolve by everyone. But yeah, that's pretty much what we know about Shadow Garden so far. If you found this lore video to be entertaining, then feel free to leave a like and let me know in the comments. You can also check out my cut content videos if you're looking for more Eminence and Shadow content. There'll be plenty more of those to come out soon, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, a huge thanks to Sleepy Satan from my Discord for helping me out with this. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!